Life is complex.
So is our mental health. It cannot be understood by diagnosis alone.
Our philosophy is treat the person, not the mental illness.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Humanizing Mental Health. I'm Jeremy Alcorn.
And I'm Trent Akers.
And today we are joined by Kristina Denton. Thank you so much for joining us all the way from California.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you guys.
So to start out today, for our audience, I actually want to just read the pitch that was given to us, and because I think it really captures things well. So the individual that sent this to us says, I represent Kristina Denton, an actress, writer, and producer in Hollywood with a 20-year career. And she's got a story that is equal both parts funny and wrecking. That's a very interesting way of putting it. She accidentally took a job at a Los Angeles erectile dysfunction clinic, then spent a year as a shockwave therapy technician treating hundreds of men. The stuff men can confess to her became the backbone of her debut memoir, You Don't Know Dick. So,
full stop. Nothing else needed.
That really raises your attention. No pun intended.
Who has questions? There you go. That was a good one.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things, of course, we got to start with. By the way, I'm familiar with shockwave because they use it in other ways, right? So I did a little bit of process, watched some of the other stuff you did, and kind of your descriptions, and to me, it's like this thing is like a jackhammer, and I have no idea how it's used on erectile tissue, but on my back, I was thinking if that got used in other places, that would be painful. Doesn't even begin to describe it. It's like a jackhammer whacking you.
Yeah, supposedly the technology is a little better these days. This was a few years ago, but yes, it sounds like a jackhammer, and I think it feels like little baby rubber bands snapping you over and over and over and over again as the sound wave kind of hits the tissue and sends like a pulse through to kind of disrupt and create trauma. It's like micro trauma. So that triggers your own body to then send healing properties and causes something called angiogenesis, which is just kind of the creation of new blood vessels so that the blood flow is increased. And that doesn't matter what part of your body you're putting it on. That's the idea behind the technology. Yeah.
Wow. So it said in there that you got into this by accident. Like, how do you get into this by accident?
Such a great question, but it is true. I was working at a wellness clinic. We were just a wellness clinic like all the other hundreds of them in every strip mall in Los Angeles, right? We were providing IV nutrition, cryotherapy, hormone, weight loss advice. We had all of these services, but we did not have anything for sexual health. This was not something that was originally there. So I was the office manager. I helped a couple of friends of mine open the center. We were about 3 months into being open, and the couple, they said, we're never going to make it. We're never going to survive. There's just too much saturation of the same services in LA. We need something that sets us apart. The husband of the duo heard a Joe Rogan podcast talking about this service, and he went, boom, I have my grand idea. Comes to me all excited. It's like, this is what we're going to do. You're the only employee, so you're going to get certified. And, prior to that, in fairness to him, I wasn't just an actor and a writer. I had a degree in exercise science, physiology, nutrition. I had a physical therapy background. No one ever had their clothes off in the jobs I was working in before. But, so the idea that I had experience working with people and their bodies wasn't foreign to me, but this intimate setting of being very, somewhat, possibly very risque for me as a woman working on men, was not something I had ever even knew existed, let alone was a possibility. So I needed money. I needed to pay rent. They were offering me more money to do this job in desperation of just trying to start as soon as possible without having to find some new person to trust. And so I got the job. That's how it happened. So it is kind of an accident.
I see.
I didn't go looking for it or put my resume in, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I just want to make sure, so you were working for them prior to this, so I'm wondering, so would you consider this like an upward promotion?
Right. This is climbing the ladder. Yeah. Yes. In terms of financially, it was, but then it became I mean, they promoted me to vice president of the company within a few months because we were doing
Wow.
so well. And I think we were the #1 clinic that year outside of the headquarters in Florida for that procedure. And so, I mean, it was very early days for this therapy existing for erectile dysfunction. So I think we were the only clinic really doing it. I think one doctor had the machine, but they weren't really marketing it. So they didn't know what to do. So I had men coming in from other states, other counties to come and see us because we were the only one that had this machine. Yeah.
So I'm curious, with that in mind, how many of these men that were coming into the clinic were clear about like what you were going to do?
Before they came in?
Well, like as they
Yes, before they came in.
like
What did the informed consent look like?
like
no.
I'm
Yeah.
really curious because like
Mhm.
like as a therapist, right? Like a lot of people have
Yeah.
an idea of what therapy looks like they see kind of an approximation on TV, but I'm
Sure.
just imagining like you're sitting down and I'm like, even if they're coming in for erectile dysfunction, like a lot of men are very protective of that area.
Mhm.
So I'm imagining it's like, how many times are you almost having to like come in and like they're almost frightened coming in and being like, okay, like I want to deal with
Yeah.
this issue, but then what
Right.
does that look like? Because the minute Jeremy says
Yeah.
a jackhammer, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I no, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think you make a really good point. I'm not quite sure how many of them did, a ton of research. I think some people from my assumption was like, oh, there's a solution that doesn't involve pills, that doesn't involve injections or surgery. Let me go figure this out and tell no one and hurry up and like move forward with my life, right? Because this is kind of one of those urgent things in their life that they just want to pretend it's not happening, deal with it and move on. And a lot of the guys were coming to me having done taken pills for years, they stopped being effective. Having done injections, right? Like things that were so much more costly to their overall health, potentially invasive. And this was the first non-invasive, readily available treatment. It was expensive. So I imagine, yeah. Right, not physically invasive. But I imagine they were doing enough research to know how much it was going to cost them and then know what they were signing up for. So they had a pretty good marketing program as far as like you click on, it's like, here's exactly what it is and here's what you do and da. So I imagine they knew what they're signing up for in theory, at least. But the actual feeling, the act of it, I'm sure all of that was softened in the marketing, right? To make sure that they felt safe. But I knew from an early, I think going in the first, I don't even know, maybe 2 months or so, I was like, this is so insane. This is absurd. Like, I'm an actor. I don't know what I'm doing. Right. It was kind of that, like, how did I get here? What is my life? And then I started to notice this pattern of men, kind of all coming in with the guard up, the kind of shame. Nothing was being like shown to me at first. It was all protective behavior or detached or trying to kind of control the situation with certain comments or comedy. And so I was meeting them in that space too, because I was like, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing here either, man. We're just here. And then I started to recognize the responsibility I had as the technician, just probably like a therapist or social worker. It's like, I have a responsibility to sort of set the entire mood here, give them permission to feel like they're falling apart, give them permission to feel the shame, give them, so it felt like my acting background was coming in handy because I was like, okay, I need to adapt to the different energy that I'm in front of. If a guy is closed off and he's uncomfortable, maybe I can disarm him with humor. Maybe I can disarm him with just self-deprecating comment, like, or just normalizing this and telling him how many people are experiencing the same thing. So I always try to find a way in to kind of appeal to their different personalities so that they could feel more relaxed with me, because it was just such a responsibility I had. And I took that very seriously. And it was an honor in a way, because I'm like, all right, I'm now meeting men at their lowest. And this is something that just occurred to me through the job, is how full of shame men are about this. Because I was younger and I was like, I don't know any guys dealing with this. This must just be like this old guy thing, right? But it very much wasn't. And so I had this front row seat to male shame that I didn't know existed, let alone knew what to do with. And so it was sort of like trial an error for me to really find my way into to help them feel safe in order to open up and share, because a lot of men never even told their wives they were coming in to see anybody for this problem, right? They were even hiding that. So there was so much shame wrapped around this for the majority of them that I felt that, and I wanted to handle it with care to the best of my untrained, non-therapy ability, right? Like, so, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
You know,
interesting, because I mean, you bring the human into it immediately,
Yeah.
and you say untrained, but you have a physio background already. Acting,
Yeah.
of course, that makes so much sense. Because
Absolutely.
guess what?
Empathy.
You get to play the role of technician,
Hmm. Well, and you
and
learn
that's
in
a real
acting
role.
to, it's a real role, you're right. And then you learn acting is all about being able to empathize with different characters that you're taking on. You can't sit here and hold judgment against a character, or you will never be able to fully embody them, right? So you have to embody all their messy parts, all their flaws. And I know, my whole mantra from young age is I loved storytelling in movies because it made me feel less alone. And I thought, okay, well, how do I make these people feel less alone? I don't have a male genital part to relate to them over, but at least I can be human with them and say, hey, it's okay to be, you're not broken just because something in your body isn't working. So it's just like I pulled in all these skills from all these different things that I had to sort of be there and hold space for them the best I could.
yeah. And yeah, I want to say something like where, where you were saying I have to embody the role. How much through this process were you really helping the men embody themselves? Because I've also heard that acting is about reacting. So it's about helping them to really
Mm-hmm.
reconnect with who they are
Yeah.
and reconnect with that part of their body. Because I can imagine that there was a sense of like disassociation to some degree because this was
Oh
not
yeah.
functioning.
Oh yeah. And I think that's probably the common thread I got as far as their first behavior that I would witness is the complete dissociation of like, this isn't really happening. They would put the focus on me. What does your boyfriend think about this? Like, everything was just about trying to push away the discomfort. And I think what you said about embodying, like it was so much about being curious, right? Like asking the right
Mm.
questions, just continuously kind of, and that's part of what you do as an actor. You mine and you excavate the character's psyche so that you can embody that. And so for me, I'm like, all right, let me just get really curious about this person. Let me find out what brought them here. Like if they're feeling safe to share, right? It's just constantly staying curious about their experience, because for some guys, they didn't all have the same story. I just saw a big pattern that there was some level of shame in all of them to some degree. Even if they weren't showing it to me, I got pretty good at seeing the cover and the sort of the way they would deflect. Again, another acting thing is how do we cover what's really going on? We're really feeling this, but what is our behavior that we use to protect ourselves so that nobody finds out the truth, right? So many of that training that I had as an actor came in play here.
So I'm curious over the course, like how, would this be weeks? Would this be months that you would see them? Like, would it be
Yeah, it's a
one or
good
two
question. Yeah, so we had the protocol called for 6 sessions, right? Each session was about an hour, and we would spread that out. At first, I think the protocol was because again, it was the Wild West of the service. It was ever changing. I would say the first few months we were seeing people twice a week for 3 weeks. So it was like 6 sessions really concentrated in a few weeks. And then we would do once a week for 3 weeks, take a break, like, right. So I got to see these men, we'll say 6 hours really of different, and then I'd watch them improve and I'd give them homework in between sessions. I put them through something I called penis boot camp because I was bringing my training background, my personal training background, nutrition background, and saying, hey, we got to change our whole lifestyle to help you improve your blood flow and circulation. So I was, I felt very invested in their success and them, sending them off like this thing worked and they got their money's worth and they feel like a new person. And it was a lot. It was very intense for 6 sessions. Yeah.
Mhm. So then, what did you learn about men?
So much. I think, for me, especially going in the blueprint that I had for men, I was raised by a very inconsistent, absent, alcoholic, verbally abusive father. That wasn't only what he was, but it gave me this lack of safety, I think, in general with men. So I found myself either dating men just like that, were unavailable, very abusive, inconsistent. I didn't really trust men, I would say, on a whole, or I would be best friends with them. And then I would just like be one of the guys with them and feel kind of this power, like, oh, I'm in charge of this because, we're just buddies. And it felt like men, I had a very simplistic view of men. They were either one or the other, right? It was like, I can be friends with you because you're safe, or you're an unavailable, unpredictable man like my dad. And of course, I didn't consciously know this at the time, but that's kind of how I saw men. So, of course, my first impulse going into this job was like, oh, of course, men want to fix their dicks. Like, they just want to keep having sex, the pervs, And this is during the beginning of the Me Too movement. So we have this world, this culture, this movement saying men are so bad, we're bastardizing them. And I was like, yeah, I have my own stories. I agree with that. And now I'm walking into the space where I'm supposed to have empathy for men. And at first I was like, this is stupid. This is just a crazy job, right? And I leaned into the comedy and I leaned into things. And as soon as that pattern started emerging where I started to witness their shame, I started to hear so many stories of their heartache and their heartbreak about their wives dying, or the divorces, or the infidelity that the wife thought he was having because his penis didn't work. And like, it just, all of a sudden I was like, whoa, men are so beautifully emotional and sensitive and vulnerable. They just don't have the tools or the permission to just be so open with it the way that females do. And so I found myself going, my gosh, like, I feel like in a way there's like, they have it worse when it comes to this, because they're so blocked from being able to be fully themselves. They can be there's a private self and a public self we all have, but by and large, there's this block from them really being able to show vulnerability in public. And I saw what that was costing them. And I saw what it was also costing me to think men weren't capable of that, and women to not see that side of men. And so I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I started backing up and kind of looking at this from a bird's eye view and saying, we need to do something about this. There's this huge gap between men and women, this polarization. And if we only knew, you know what I mean? If we only knew what was really going on, we could meet in this messy human middle that has nothing to do with male or female, right? And I felt protective of men. I felt compelled to champion for them because of what the world was saying and how the world was just basically tossing them out with the garbage. And it left me in a very confused place, because I was like, yes, two things can be true, right? That we can hold men accountable for bad behavior, but we also have to give them a chance. We also have to we can't abandon them and expect them to heal in a vacuum. It doesn't work like that, right? So it put all this in my head, and I didn't know at the time that I would write a book about my story. I thought I was going to help figure out, I was like, I've got to figure out a way to tell this story so that we can really help men and then help women by proxy. And then what I didn't realize was happening to me is what it was teaching me about my dad, and ultimately the pain he was in and what he was experiencing in his life without the proper resources or tools because of his generation, because of all the things like that. And so it became my story instead of becoming just about the men. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yes. In fact, this is like the fundamental weaving together of healing is so powerful. Maybe you can even see the tears in my eyes, because I think it's so fundamentally powerful, where you're going in to help someone else, and you choose.
Mm-hmm.
And choosing to hold space then allows you to find out all of these other things about their life.
Mm-hmm.
And I would postulate, by the way, I can't say that this is exactly true. I've never done any research, but that it's not a coincidence that the men with these kinds of relational traumas and so forth were experiencing erectile dysfunction. Now think about this for a second. That female experiences were part of their injuries, and it was a woman that was providing healing to them in that in the treatment. Like the question is actually, what was the treatment? Was the treatment just the shock that was happening to their physical body? Was the treatment the shock that was happening to have a woman in front of them that could be real with them and empathic? Probably both.
Yeah. I love what you said there, Jeremy, because what I really think you're hitting on there, because we're talking about this on both an individual level and on a social level. But I mean, really what we're hitting at is we're hitting on attachment. You were repairing, from what I'm hearing from what the both of you are saying, is you were repairing attachment wounds because they needed to be able to connect with you so that they could have connection with themselves, because we can have something called arousal non-concordance, which is, of course, where a man can, of course, get aroused but not be actually aroused.
Right.
But in order
Have
for
no
that to
erection.
happen, yeah. But I mean, like if he doesn't feel connected or safe with the body, you're not going to have that neural pathway. So you needed to have that. Because I would, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I can imagine that basically, like as that was going on, there was probably, instances where they were feeling safer to be able to have that, and maybe like I'm having longer, better, more fulfilling erections and everything that would come after that.
Yeah, and they would get erect on my table. Let's be straight up. Like that would happen often. And whether, the thing is that was so interesting is that because the nature of the machine being so aggressive, they were wearing numbing cream we'd have them apply numbing cream for about an hour before their session, right? And so theirs was this like desensitization of the entire area. So they didn't realize what was happening, but it would happen. And I think if they noticed it, it would be so embarrassing for them. And I'm like, no, I think this is what we want. You know what I mean? Like maybe not during the session because that might be a little more painful. But yeah, maybe there was a safety. I don't think about it that way because I'm, again, as a woman, I'm just trying to make them feel safe. And I'm not equating that to like potentially that's what's happening for them, but very much possible.
Sure. Like the thing is, it's non-sexual touch, and with a woman,
very clinical.
That's in a very intimate part of the body.
Yeah.
And so to be able to even restructure or reset that, because like I'll be open myself if I was like, going into a clinic like this and I came in and you were the technician, I'd just be like, sorry,
and I'm going
home.
And
yeah, like not happening.
Many rejections are nope. And I was like I'm the only one doing it here.
Not happening.
I'm good.
Yeah. And no, and I mean, like I can appreciate where you're coming from, Jeremy, because like as my status as a person with a disability, there are many times that, as somebody that, that was born male and all that jazz and has had several female caregivers, there are times that literally things just pop up and it has
happen.
And it has nothing to do with them. And for me, like, especially because I've had people from various backgrounds, having to look at them and say, this has nothing to do with you. This is just a physiological response. So it's like, you were dealing with their shame, but I also wondered for you, like how you almost had to go kind of almost unlearn that for yourself. Because how much is a woman actually trained the minute, because they've even talked about historically with nurses, they used to literally give them hammers whenever like a man would get an erection, that they would actually hit them with that. Yeah. You can actually go on the, I know. Yeah. So it's that, we should
you
just
were basically
normalize.
hitting people with hammers too, just, a smaller one.
They were paying for it though.
Of course, it's totally different.
It was more like a gun. It was like,
Yeah.
But yeah.
Ping, ping. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like we just so I'm visualizing this properly, because you guys have both seen the machine. Is it almost like a massage gun?
So it's interesting. I would say yes and no. It has that kind of look, and there's many different ones. Some are just like a wand. They look like a wand that you hold. This one I had to actually pull a trigger in a way and look at how many actual shocks I was giving each section, because you go section by section, right? This is like, down each side of the shaft, but then you're all the way around underneath the testicles, the groin. Like it's very, even more intimate than just, you know what I mean, on the penis. And so, I was just very like, I was like reconstructing them, And so it was just these poor men are lying on a treatment table looking up at the sky, just like, not wanting to make eye contact with me because it's just so personal what I'm doing with them. And painful, So it was intense.
Yeah.
So sorry, you go ahead, Trent.
No. Please, Jeremy.
Okay. So the other thing that I was wondering about is that you start to have this different view of men. Then what happened between you and your dad?
So my dad actually passed away right before I got the job. So I go get certified. I know that's why this book is so wild for me, because I went to get certified. We knew he was dying. He was dying of prostate cancer. It was coming. I mean, he had been 3.5 years. We knew it was terminal from day one, but it should have never happened. He was very young. He was 59. It was a whole thing. But yeah, so I come back from the training. I have this new certification, and then he passes away. And I go up there. This is all in my book. And I spent about 2 weeks away. I come back and I have my first client. So in a way, the clinic became a wonderful distraction, right? Something for me to just dive into, find the humor, find the funny. My dad taught me that's how we cope and survive life. And all the while I'm grieving this very complicated relationship with my father, right? And I'm the oldest of 4 girls, so naturally, like, I was kind of the closest to seeing behavior that, we didn't like, and my sisters were a little more shielded from it. And it was a very complicated time, but the clinic almost saved me in a way, because I went into this real dark place, and it was like all I did was work so that I didn't have to think about my dad being gone. And again, yeah, it took me the first, I would say, 6 months after he died. It was just like I was dissociating, and I was like, well, I do this now, and I guess that's my life. And it really wasn't until the job, I had the job for 1 year. It wasn't really until the very end of the job that I really processed the grief, because I stepped away for a second and I was processing what I learned about him in those rooms and what they were teaching me about how to have this new lens on my father. So it was everything was post-mortem. Everything was like this after the fact, but it still gave me a lot of peace that I really needed, you know? Yeah, and I credit the clinic for that. Who knew?
Yeah.
No, I want to process for a minute, because I can see that there's something that's really hitting for you, Jeremy. So I want to give you a moment here to speak to that, please.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thanks for turning that back to me, because so my mom died when I was 20.
Mm,
And the notion of a relationship with a parent is a fascinating thing,
mm,
because my relationship with my mom has changed. It's different now, even though she's not physically here. There's like a fundamental aspect of self that until you've looked back and really understood your relationship with your parent, that you can't, fully encompass,
mhm,
particularly if there is unfinished business.
mhm.
And and so that's the thing that I find powerful about your story. And can you articulate how your relationship with your father has changed? Like, you talked about coming to peace, and
Mm.
that's wonderful. But
Yeah.
can you articulate how your relationship with your dad has actually changed?
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. And I'm so sorry that you went through that so young. That's
Mhm.
incredibly young to go through that. And you make such a good point. Like, our relationship does continue to evolve even after they're gone. And yeah, so I think I had found a way, almost like, this is, and again, I write about this in my book, but it's like when somebody who feels like a monster gets a cancer diagnosis, they immediately become the hero. You know what I mean? It's like, it feels to me like, oh my gosh, this person has cancer. No matter what they did, now we have to sort of all feel like they're the victim. And I remember feeling like so angry, because I knew it was forcing me to have to like make peace with him to a degree before he died, right? Or at least have the face of it and behave towards him as if there was no anger, resentment, and what I had to like compartmentalize, put all that aside, and just go, he is now dying. So let's romanticize him and make him the hero, right? And that was really hard for me, right? And it felt like I had to put my pain on hold so I could serve his last few whatever we got with him, right? And and once he passed, there was this sense of, and I had so much guilt about this, but I had so much relief, because I knew he could never hurt me again. He could never say anything to make it worse, but then I knew it would also never get better. So there was just this real complex war inside of me when he was gone, because I was like, I felt free in a lot of ways, but then I felt just the deep grief of, we'll never get that repair. There was never a conversation. There was never an official, like, him apologizing. It was just that I had to find that so I could free myself. And I actually found it with him on his deathbed. And this is, before the full year of really, really healing and learning about men. It's like I pulled some future version of myself to just give him peace and give me peace. I mean, he was unconscious, but it was just the thing that I needed to sort of set myself on a journey of being free. What those men taught me, because I was witnessing and I was hearing about similar marriages that my parents had, or seeing a reversal in a marriage where I look at and I was like, wow, this wife, she's the monster. And this poor man, at least from what I was experiencing, because I met them both, right? And I was like, wait, I didn't know the woman could be the monster and the man could be like one chasing love and begging for love. And wait, right? So it just the exposure to similarity, the exposure to differences made me look at my parents and my dad as human and go, oh, wait. Oh, they had their own pain. They had their own trauma they never processed. They had their own unresolved experiences with their childhood or their parents. And they were using tools that were available, like alcohol, cigarettes, avoidance, workaholism, right? Things that made them look functional on the outside, but were damaging them slowly and eroding their whole psyche in their life. And ultimately, my dad died of cancer because he had terrible habits, right? Maybe that's not only why, but one of the contributing factors. And so because I was seeing that, it was like, oh, and it gave me, and I started learning a little bit more about my dad's childhood. I started talking to my sisters more about what they knew and my mom knew. And I was like, whoa, my dad had a lot of trauma we did not know about, that he kept inside, that he didn't ever have tools to process or have permission to process, right? I mean, like really damaging stuff. And I was like, well, that makes sense, right? So now I could have this perspective on how it still makes me emotional.
It's all good.
He was doing the best that he could, and I really believe that. And maybe it is romanticizing him. I think he made bad choices. I think we can, like I said, we could hold people accountable for that. But I think at the end of the day, he was giving us a better life than he had. And I think that was his version of success. And he was protecting us from the worst version of himself by being gone or being drunk. And that was like, here's how I can tolerate this existence. And if you don't see me under these circumstances, it could be worse. And so I found this way to just have compassion for what he didn't know and what he wasn't able to process. And it broke my heart for him, and it broke my heart for me, because being collateral damage to that is really hard as a kid. I needed a different version of a dad. I didn't get that, but I still love the one that I did have. And I'm grateful for the learning now, because that's just what I have to pour into and believe for myself so I can have peace. If that answers the question.
Oh, that was beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing and being vulnerable.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you, guys.
for sure. Because the most important person that you healed was yourself.
Oh, yeah. I didn't think my book was going to live in like a self-help section. And everyone's like, oh, it's so empowering. I'm like, really? I just wrote my story. Yeah.
But I mean, right there, I want to stop you, because I just want to say, like people heal through parallel narratives, and and that's, like it's not just via drugs or via being in the moment, but sometimes it's hearing another person's story. We can see those points, and it can give us those moments to be able to self-reflect and to have that. So, like whether it lives in the self-help section or a slice of life, it's powerful medicine.
It is. And it's the weirdest thing for me to say, but the clinic was such a gift. It was such a gift for me to have that insight, that intel, that kind of, just that sacred space with men that I so desperately needed. And I didn't know that I needed, because of just constantly and forever misunderstanding my dad and men in general. So I feel this calling to share about it and speak about it, because having that front row seat to male shame as a woman is like, whoa, and listen, another woman who didn't have the same background or father or acting background or whatever could have experienced what I did completely differently, right? They wouldn't have taken from it what I did. It wouldn't have changed their life the way it changed mine. But, there's something, I think there was something greater at play. And certainly there's a reason why I gave the hooky, shocky title and, cover. And I was like, hey, I want people to sit up and pay attention to this, even if it's just because they're fascinated by the taboo conversation part of it. But then there's something so real here that we can all talk about,
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
I'm curious because this is something as a therapist, I know that I wonder about, I'm sure that you wonder about as well. But I'm wondering for you, like, do you ever think back on some of the men that you've treated all those years ago and have impacted their lives and they've impacted yours and wonder where are they now? What has gone on with them? What is the rest of their story?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's definitely something I think about. I care about them. I had moments, after the job of running into them in the wild, and I write about it a little bit in my book because my first impulse when I would see one is to like run and hide. Like I felt like I represented their shame and this horrendous thing, that secret, and I didn't want to be a reflection of that to them, especially in public. It's like this recognition of like, oh, she knows so much about me. I don't want anybody to know. Maybe it's like running into your therapist in public. I don't know. But it felt for me like I didn't want them to see me. And so because we had that moment, it was sacred. And I thought that I wanted to protect that as much as I could for them. And so there was only, I think, one that actually approached me, and we were out like at a bar or something, and but we didn't have to do the weird, awkward, like, how do you know each other? You know what I mean? We never had to deal with that. So, but yeah, I often do. And I do know a couple of them just like through my circle somehow, some way, but I've never actually had a conversation with any of them this many years later to say like, what was that like for you? That would be a really kind of cool thing, but I don't know how I would ever have that, that conversation unless it was just supposed to happen. Yeah.
So
Mhm.
we should probably start to wrap things up. In terms of the conversation, Trent, are you ready to start, or you want me to go first? Well, all three of
Yeah,
us will do it, but
yeah. If you don't mind, because like there's actually been like as you've been sharing your story, the one thing that I think is like really poignant because like as we're talking about your story, I think about the author Bell Hooks and about she wrote a book called The Will to Change and talking about patriarchy and how it's it's again like one thing I want to highlight is the fact that like they talk about patriarchy on a lot of levels where it can be damaging to men or women, and I think like one of the major things that you really highlighted is, and this is the point of our podcast, is really connecting on a human level where you had to journey into the man's world and then find the commonality. And I think to me, that was like the big point where we have to look at systems like patriarchy and we can't just look at them through a black and white lens that one person has power or one person gets harmed, but that everybody can experience harm and that we really need to come back to the common humanity that we all share.
Mhm. Yep, exactly. That's very beautifully said. I feel that because it brings me back to the whole reason I was drawn to wanting to be in Hollywood making movies is helping people feel less alone. And men need that too, right? Men and women both need that permission to feel like they belong, that they're seen, that their feelings are valid, that their pain is valid. And there's so many different ways people look for that and not always healthy ways. And so I've always considered myself a little bit of a disruptor. And I feel like I want to disrupt this narrative and I say, hey, I'm a woman and I'm going to sit here and I'm going to stand up for men. And maybe that'll get me canceled in a lot of ways for women. But you know what? It's my truth and it's what I need for my own healing journey and peace. And I'll never see men the same. And I love that. And I think it's really valuable for me. And I'm so grateful for that. Yeah.
and what stood out to me the most, actually, there's lots of different ways that people find their way to wellness. They find their way to healing, and we never know what we're engaging in that will create the wisdom into our life. And so the big thing that stands out to me is that you rework this relationship with your dad where he wasn't there to reconcile with anymore, but you could forgive him. Forgive him not only for what he did, but for what he didn't do for you that he needed to be there for. And the forgiveness came through understanding.
Yeah.
And that's a gift. That is purely a gift.
Yeah, absolutely. And in all honesty, like it's so much more peaceful for me to be in that place, you know, and move through my life with that level of lightness of spirit. It's just I feel called to do more than hold on to things that I can't fix. You know, it's like let me just let that go and show up in places that I can be of service. And one of those is just being free in my heart and having, if I can't have compassion for myself or others, like what are we doing here, right? So yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is amazing. Thanks again for joining us.
Oh, this
Yeah.
is so awesome, you guys. I appreciate you going
Mhm.
deep with me. Listen, healing one dick at a time. No, it's my little
Yeah,
joke.
yeah.
I had to bring the humor back.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. Yeah. And so I just want to reiterate your book is out on June 30th. Is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
right.
out.
So it is on shelves now.
Yeah.
All
Mhm.
right.
Is it
Awesome.
Mhm.
also
Yeah.
in Canada, which is exciting. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. On that note, I'm Trent Nakers.
And I'm Jeremy Alcorn.
See you next time.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope that this message has been as meaningful to you as it has been to us. If you're looking for help, you can find us on Facebook at Humanizing Mental Health.